It is.
Frank, quite a personality.
Yes, and then I moved to an apartment north in East Rogers Park, and then I went to Des Plaines, and then I came to rabbinical school, and I met my husband here, and I stayed, and I was going to teach, but the person who had a chaplaincy here felt that I was perfectly suited, and
Wow.
I agreed to work for her for two months until she could get a replacement. 35 years later, I was still working there, and I loved what I did. And in fact, I've been called in now to do some things.
Where do you live now, Joan Sack?
But I'm disabled. I was hurt 9 years ago, and
I'm sorry to hear that.
thank you. I went to display. So what did you ask me? I didn't catch the question. Was there a
Joan?
question? Yeah.
This is Carol Brumer Glicksman from Hebrew U.
Oh my gosh.
Carol Brumer.
Carol.
How are you?
I can't believe it. Fine, we have to exchange information.
Yes, for sure.
Oh,
For
Carol,
sure.
are you Debbie's friend?
I'm sorry?
Debbie Carol
Yes.
Brumer.
Yes, Rabbi, yes, I am.
Wow. Would you like to be in touch with her?
I am through Facebook. Thank you.
Wonderful. I just spoke to her this morning. She was
glad
out with her two daughters in Orlando.
Yes, and her husband's the radiologist or something?
A
Okay.
neurologist. He's gonna be 59 this Wednesday.
Janahora.
a young man.
Joan, you look,
Not what I expected.
What did you say, Carol?
Hey,
you look
today
great.
my grandson was supposed to get married.
You do
Oh,
too. You look really good. What are you doing
Of
today?
people who haven't seen each other for a long time. Miriam should have been on there.
Jeff, you're a Makasher. You and Debbie, are you Makashri?
We like to network, it's true.
Is that what that word means?
Joan, we'll catch up offline.
That'll be great. That'll be terrific.
Okay.
Look forward to it.
Excuse me for interrupting, Dan. My apologies. I'll be
No,
quiet.
it's fine. But we always have a nice schmooze before, but that is going to end now as I mute everybody. That for Jeffrey. Jeffrey and Deb, just make sure I can hear you.
Okay, you hearing us fine?
Okay.
Good.
Good afternoon, at least for most of you. My name is Dan Cedarbaum, and I have the privilege of being the executive director of the Mordecai M. Kaplan Center for Jewish Peoplehood. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to what should be a fascinating program. I know it will be a fascinating program this afternoon, titled Saving Shavuot, Counting the Omer and Family Engagement, with two of the Kaplan Center's favorite professionals, favorite people generally. Rabbi Dr. Jeffrey Schein is our senior education consultant. Next to him is a woman who happens to be his wife of many years, but is important independently. Dr. Deborah Schein is also a very accomplished professional educator and expert on educational theory. Many of you, I think, remember going back the days when Jeffrey worked very actively within the Reconstructionist movement. After that, he moved to the Siegel College of Jewish Studies in Judaic Studies in Cleveland, which is now part of Case Western University. And Jeffrey has since wisely decided to leave there to be with his grandchildren, among other things, and Deborah in Minneapolis. Organized at the end of 2010 and based in Evanston, Illinois, the Kaplan Center is a not-for-profit organization devoted to the transformation of Jewish community through the dissemination and promotion of the thought and writings of Mordecai Kaplan and the advancement of the agenda of the Kaplanian approach to Judaism in the 21st century. The Kaplan Center's perspective is explicitly trans-denominational. I see some of my colleagues besides Jeffrey and Deborah here, Dr. Mel Skult and Dr. Eric Kaplan. Stay tuned for next week. I'll say something in a moment about that. I don't know if any apologize if I'm going to miss anybody. I'll scroll through quickly, but they are on. Jane Susswine from our board of directors. No fair hiding, wherever you are. Let's see who else. I think that may be it. I apologize if I missed anybody. We're delighted that so many of you have told us that you've really enjoyed the last 3 programs we've done on Sunday afternoons. The first 2 with Shaul Magid, the third with Rachel Sabbath Beit Halachmi. Somebody was calling her Rachel. It's complicated. She used to be Rachel Shabbat Beit Halachmi when she was in Israel, but so people know in America she is Rachel Sabbath Beit Halachmi. And I mention that in part because she will be joining our colleagues Mel Scald and Eric Kaplan next Sunday afternoon, same time, same place. Stay tuned for detailed login information for the first of what I imagine will be several programs over the months ahead on Mordecai Kaplan's diaries as we look ahead to the publication of volume 3 under Mel Scalt's expert editing in the fall, and more information, as we get closer to that. At that point, although he's already at work at it, Eric Kaplan takes over for the 4th and concluding volume of Communings of the Spirit, this amazing edited, annotated multi-volume set of one of the greatest documents, the most important documents of 20th century American Judaism, and maybe beyond, but primarily American Judaism. So as that's next week, as Rabbi Brief already noted, I'm very much looking forward to doing a program with my friend, Rabbi Dr. Zev Elef, a very talented, very prolific, young American Jewish historian trained under Jonathan Sarna at Brandeis, and he's also a modern Orthodox rabbi and lives in the area. And when the Jewish Center a couple of years ago wanted to mark their centennial, they hired Zev to work on that project with them, and he did a great job. So I thought it would be important and fun to bring to all of you and lots of other people, I hope, the story of Kaplan's first synagogue, and that is the first synagogue he served as senior rabbi, not the Society for the Advancement of Judaism, but the very rocky and interesting story of the period from 1917, 1918 to 1922, that is really the prequel, if you will, to the story of the SAJ. Lots more on that coming up in the future. But it's also the prequel to the story of another very successful synagogue. And of course, for those, I don't want to, sorry, I just love this topic. They've obviously diverged enormously over the last 100 years. They both are unusually vibrant synagogues, still both on West 86th Street in Manhattan. And one has already celebrated its centennial. The other will celebrate its centennial in 2022. And that is unusual. I mean, I think somebody told me the life expectancy for an urban healthy synagogue is roughly 75 years statistically. So that is quite a thing. In the chat, as usual, we have, yes, thank you. You'd think I would learn, but I need to go to, right, to speaker view. Oh, sorry. Where's speaker view? I'm being reminded about the gallery view. Speaker view. Yeah, okay. Sorry. So in the chat room function, to my right anyway, you'll see at the top from me our web address, which is always nice to have. The source sheet for sources packet for today's program below it. And just in case you need to get in touch with Jeffrey, well, either today or later, or Deborah, Jeffrey's email address. As usual, our preferred method for taking questions will be using that chat function. This has worked very well in our past programs. So please at any time submit questions to Jeffrey not to me today, and you can do it to everyone, but in general, and you can share thoughts with everyone, but questions you want Jeffrey to and Deborah to take up, I suggest you send to Jeffrey. And I'm not being a male chauvinist pig. Just Jeffrey is the name that I think appears on the screen. So now I turn lawyer for a moment. As always, we are video recording this program. If you are uncomfortable with that, you of course need not stay on, or you can turn off your video, as I will need to do it at some point, by the way. You're asking a question or otherwise speaking will be deemed to constitute consent to our recording of what you say. And by the way, recordings of almost all of our programs are or will soon become available on the Kaplan Center website. So we did a program specifically leading into Passover. And now we thought it would be wonderful to do a program leading into Shavuot. So I don't want to take up any more of their time. With no further ado, it is my pleasure to turn the podium over to Jeffrey Schein and Deborah Schein.
Thank you so much. We're delighted, and seeing so many faces from different phases and stages of our life is a delight. And pulling this together has been a delight for Deb and I. It's been an opportunity to think back about different threads of who we've been as a Jewish family and as Jewish educators. And I think I want to identify in the beginning, well, there's two things I want to do in the beginning. One is to let you know there'll be periodic times where we'll stop and invite not only questions, but participation. Hey, we're participatory educators, so there'll be times where we'll ask you to comment, make a question, do a task with us, so be forewarned. And I also would like to offer two different brachot, because learning is holy, and being able to learn in challenging, difficult times is, I would say, doubly holy. So in regard to each of these brachot, if you'd like to say amen, muted or unmuted, please do. If it expresses something about who you are Jewishly and your sense about Judaism, and then we'll move on. So the first is the most traditional of brachot, La'asok b'divrei Torah, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Thank you, and I've been pleased that in a number of congregations across the country, people have picked up on what some viewers from the Kaplan Center saw in the article about two brachot for the COVID-19 era. And this one is really based on all the wonderment in Midrash of the rabbis about how could a Torah at Shavuot or any other time be revealed to such incommensurate minds as the 600,000 that assembled at Sinai. And in response to that, they have one of the shorter and least known, but I think very powerful brachas, Baruch atah Adonai Chacham HaRazim. Blessed is God who can discern what's going on in those minds, and even better, bring them together in common purpose. So the adaptation for our times goes like this. Baruch atah Adonai Chacham HaRazim. Blessed is God, the wise one, who endows us with the capacity through traditions, text, and technology to transcend the separateness of our minds, allowing communication and purpose to be woven together among your creatures.
Amen.
Okay, so our webinar really is based on the weaving together of three different threads of our professional and personal life. I'm a fan of this wonderful saying from the book of Proverbs, Mishlei Hahut HaMishulash Lo B'mehera Yinateh. A threefold woven cord is particularly strong, and here are the three threads that we've been trying to weave together. The first is an appreciation of the framework for multiple intelligence of Harold Gardner, which we'll share in a couple different Howard
Howard.
Gardner. I think it's Harold Kushner. Howard Gardner, that's why we work as a team, which we've encountered separately, brought together, and we think it's particularly an illuminating frame to put on Shavuot. So the second thread here is God knows Shavuot needs it. For a whole variety of reasons, I've often called Shavuot the stepchild of the Jewish holidays cycle, the Machzor Chagim. Why is that? Well, there's a number of different reasons. It doesn't come calendrically at a very friendly time. We're often wrapping up the school year, getting started at summer. There's all sorts of reasons. We lose the thin thread, which we hope not to lose. We'll be talking about the counting of the Omer and how that threads together, obviously, Pesach and Shavuot. And it's also a very under-ritualized holiday compared to Pesach for sure, compared to Shabbat. There's very little ritual that accompanies it. We have other outlets. We have Shavuot as a kind of bikurim, gathering of the first fruits of Jewish learning. That's certainly an outlet. We have the Tikkun Leil Shavuot, staying up studying. Those are all wonderful things. But at its core, Shavuot remains unritualized. So, as Deb and I have lived our lives as Jewish parents, echoing through this has been the third thread that comes in here, which is Rabbi Kaplan's clarion call in his 1972 article about the Shabbat Seder, an indispensable innovation. He says, it isn't enough for Pesach to happen once a year. We need other points of engagement that can have the ritual depth, the questioning spirit that is Pesach and is the Pesach Seder. And he suggests that we can adapt that into the framework of a Shabbat Seder. So we will share with you, I'll start off with one example, and then we'll bring Howard Gardner and Multiple Intelligences in and show you various ways over the years that we've thought that Shavuot can come alive for families and communities by expanding our understanding of what it means to prepare for Matan Torah, for the giving of the Torah. So those three threads are woven together. And I am going to, with great trepidation, do my first piece of technology here. Then I might as well do it since I'll have to do it at later points. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to take you to part of the Shavuot Seder that Deb and I created for our family, and I'll ask you actually to be part of it. I'm going to take you to the part where we actually focus on the Aseret HaDibrot. So,
You're not be able to see this.
no, well, we can move it into there. There, very good. Okay. Here. I do. Or I did. Okay, here we go. Okay. Okay, are you seeing my screen at this point? Someone unmute and tell me. You're not.
No,
No.
Okay, well,
No,
so-
Jeffrey, what do you want up? Do you want me to put up the sources packet and you can refer to it?
yes, for now. Thanks, Dan. So as Dan brings it up, we'll orient you to the beginning of that packet are the 1972 article about the Shabbat Seder by Mordecai Kaplan, and then a outlining of how Rabbi Joel Alpert, Rebecca Alpert, myself, and others work to utilize that as a deep framework for the education program at Society Hill Synagogue. So it should be coming up momentarily. Okay, so Dan, could you scroll down, please, to the Aseret HaDivrot, the 10 Commandments. That's part of the book.
From there.
They should be able to see it on their screens. They can't read the fine print.
My apologies. Bear with me 1 second. There's a better way to do this, which I will figure out right now.
You want to tell about this while we're getting it ready?
Yeah. So while Dan is finding that picture of the Aseret HaDivrot, the 10 Commandments, I should share with you here 2 Kiddush cups, crossing hands. This is always and one Kiddush cup has some wine in it, and the other
This one has
does
wine.
not, and this one does not. And as we go through, Dan's getting us closer. You know that you have to do it exactly as you do in Pesach.
There you go. You got it?
You're going to do it. I'm going to
Okay.
hold it for you.
Thank you. Okay, can everyone see the 10 Commandments adapted for children on your screen? Relatively clear? Someone unmute and tell
Oh,
me.
it went away.
Yes.
Okay,
Well, I did.
It
Not
It
was,
was.
or now it's not.
lost it. somehow.
yeah,
Yeah, I can't move around. I forgot.
There it
Sorry.
is.
okay. So
It's back.
I'd like you to take the part of the children, our children around the table and guests who have come with us on Erev Shavuot. And as I read this kid family-friendly version of the 10 Commandments, I am going to ask you to, after each of them, there'll be a slight pause to say, you can unmute and do this or stay mute, Na'aseh v'nishma. That's what the Israelites are said to have said in response to the commandment. And if you say that, you're indicating that you think this is really quite important. And for each of them, I'm going to be taking 1 drop of wine and putting it into the empty Kiddush cup. And I'm guessing some of you already understand that. But please be my partners. Adonai is our God.
Na'aseh
Asher
v'nishma.
Nisma.
Adonai is our only God.
Asher Nisma.
Na'aseh v'nishma.
Na'aseh v'nishma.
Asher Nisma.
We can be a little polyphonic here. It's okay. Don't mess with God's name.
Asher Nisma.
Celebrate Shabbat.
Asher Nisma.
Na'aseh v'nishma. Be nice to your parents.
Asher
V'nishma.
Nisma.
Okay? Don't murder.
Asher
V'nishma.
Nisma.
Don't steal.
Asher
V'nishma.
Nisma.
Be loyal to your partner.
Na'aseh v'nishma.
Don't be jealous of what others have.
Na'aseh v'nishma.
Nisma.
Mean and keep your promises.
Na'aseh v'nishma.
Nisma.
Okay. Well, it seems like it. So you've affirmed connection and commitment to these commandments, and you can't see it quite here, but my wine cup for Shavuot has gained 10 drops. I'm not sure. I don't know how to do B'Shem Omer or Umrah. I don't know who I learned it from. Sounds to me like Zalman Schachter Shlomi, but I'm not sure. So we often say that between Pesach and Shavuot, we have the maturing from freedom into responsibility. And the message here is that when we commit ourselves to commandments and discipline ourselves, then indeed we're maturing towards Sinai. We're having the sense of responsibility that it will take to put the Ten Commandments in action. And of course, it's engaged the people around the table in something that otherwise gets jettisoned to the confirmation part of Shavuot. It makes it part of the Mikdash Ma'at, the family tabernacle. So I shared that as an example of the spirit of liturgical innovation, of making it participatory, of using ritual, of creating bridges between the holidays, that I take to be part of what Kaplan, Mordecai Kaplan, is always encouraging upon us. And I'd like that to serve as a kind of framing as we move into other dimensions of creating, reenacting Shabbat Seders in other contexts, and as we go to the way in which we enlarge that participation and create multiple connections for Shavuot, if we have this understanding of multiple intelligences. And then I'm going to ask you if you could take us now to the picture of the 8 intersecting circles.
Circles, yeah.
And are you able to do that? You're trying to do it.
I was muted. Tell me what you would like.
To move to the picture of the multiple intelligences, which looks like Deb's showing you. There you go. Okay, so I don't know if we can enlarge that on your screen, Dan. I know often with screen share you can't.
Can try. Does that work?
That's better.
Okay.
Bigger. Deb?
So we promised you a talk on multiple intelligences. More than a talk, we're going to engage you in multiple intelligence thinking. And we're pretty sure that we know for sure that Kaplan was really into music and art and wanted all Jews to incorporate those qualities into their celebrations. But we're pretty sure that if he had known Howard Gardner, he would be a fan of multiple intelligences. So we're going to take you on this little journey together. So I'm going to invite you to look at the chart. And I think what I'll do is I'll give a little description because it might be hard to see. And I'll start with the little purple person running. So that's called body kinesthetics, body smarts. And the green is interpersonal, people smart. Getting along with people and sort of knowing. What color is that? Red is verbal linguistics, word smart. And the purple is logical, mathematical. It has a little computer, but it's more than just using a computer or a phone. And then the blue, or is that purple? No, it's a blue, is naturalistic, which is nature smart. And the yellow is intrapersonal, sort of knowing yourself, self-smart. The green is visual spatial, picture smart or visual smart. And the blue is obviously with the musical note, it's musical smart. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, well, let me tell you a little bit. Yeah, okay. I'm going to ask you to think about some questions. After we give you, are we going to do this?
No, we're good. Do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I am going to ask you some questions. And then I want you to think about it. And then we'll have a few of you share that. I think there are too many. We would love for everybody to share. But we think maybe it's too much to take the whole time. So just a few of you would unmute to answer these. But if you have paper and pencil, you might write it down. I'm a big fan of written reflection. So what kind of learner, given these choices, are you? That's the first question. What kind of learner are you? And which of these visual aids capture your most natural choice for learning? It's sort of the same kind of question, but maybe open it up a little bit differently. Do you want me to repeat the titles again?
Yes, please.
Okay. And I was thinking as I was speaking that, you know, if something pops into your mind that's not in the circle, I think you should add it. I mean, there's nothing that says we have to stick to Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences. So the first one was bodily kinesthetics. Then the green was interpersonal. Verbal linguistics is the next. Logical, mathematical, naturalistic, intrapersonal, about yourself, visual, intelligence, and musical. Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Okay. Do people want to share their answers and tell us why?
And say who you are,
Yeah,
just
and,
so we can.
and briefly, so we can get a few voices on.
Yeah. Stan's going to share, I think. Yeah.
Yes, I'm definitely a verbal learner. I guess that's word smart.
Mhm.
I've done that for a very early age. That I learned more about people. I learned more on people lecturing to me than reading. Although obviously I have to learn by reading. You can't, go to school without learning by reading. But my best learning, and just a little bit of an example, and I'll make it very short, is that when I took the bar exam in New York, I went to Columbia, and most of my, as Dan probably knows, and anybody else is a lawyer, most of them took something called PLI, which was a mound of papers that taught you how to take the bar exam. I went to a guy in Brooklyn named Sparaccio of all things, and what he did was lecture 8 hours a day with no papers at all.
Wow.
And I managed to, I managed to pass the bar. So, I don't know, it's a quirk of it's not something that was deliberate, but anyway, that's my story.
But from where I'm standing and listening to your story, the fact that you knew the kind of learner you were before you took the bar helped you to pass the bar. Smart.
That's correct. That's correct.
Somebody else.
And say who you are.
Yeah. Surely somebody out there wants to share. Anybody found that they couldn't decide between one?
Yeah, I picked two.
Oh, yeah?
I'm Hillel Cohn. People smart and word smart. I think that's just the way many of us were brought up. First of all, to learn from books and all other kinds of verbal things, and to learn from people. And the logic smart, the technology, really came much later, and the others are very interesting and probably have had some kind of a role in my life, but I would say particularly people and words.
Interesting.
Okay, let's hear from one. Thanks, Hillel. One more person. Anybody? Jeff, how about you? What kind of learner are you?
Hey. I'm so conveniently here. I would say word smart, but then life doesn't leave me in one domain. Yeah.
I want to answer for him because
yeah, right.
he does everything by time, and time is like not here. There's not like a spatial in time, because I'm a visual person. and he's totally not. And so together we're sort of whole because I don't wear a watch. I don't know what time I don't even know what day it is. And so time is like not important to me, but he is really like,
Right.
pew,
Don't ask Deb to give you, don't ask me to give you direction somewhere, and don't ask Deb to help you guide your calendar. Won't work. I think all of us are aware that these intelligences are multiple in the sense that we have different ways of utilizing them. We have natural preferred strengths, but we also bring them together, and we'll offer some examples of that. And we also want to stretch what the meaning might be of any one of those in relationship to Shavuot, and in particular to counting the Omer, of course. And we know that the Omer and the 50 days of counting comes out of a Hebrew tradition, a Jewish tradition of assigning to Hebrew numbers, Hebrew letters, numerical values. So Dan, would you be kind enough, and after this, if you like, I can take another stab at bringing the resource packet up. But thank you for being there. And can we try to enlarge this as well?
No, that's, I believe, the largest.
Okay, so here we go. We're being interpersonal here, and you're looking at a chart that gives the numerical value of particular Hebrew letters. And of course, in the tradition of Jewish mysticism, of Kabbalah, Gematria, those numbers also embody the values of particular words. So I'm going to ask someone who has a love of mathematics to unmute themselves and put together before our very ears the numerical value, the gematria of Torah. So just, if you think you can handle that, unmute, tell us the gematria, and tell us how you got to it.
we have a volunteer.
Yeah, let them play with it. Sometimes you have to play before you can answer.
It looks like Mel wants to do it.
Yes.
Please,
Am I
Mel.
unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Well, I wanted to speak briefly to the previous multiple intelligences for my alter ego, Mordecai Kaplan, if I could. Because he was a word person, of course, but he was also a body person, and he walked in the city very extensively every day. And one of his special walks was around the reservoir in Central Park. And I could give a whole lecture on the people that walked with him around the reservoir in Central Park. But most interestingly, what they did was they discussed the Parsha of the week. And I think it would be interesting to speculate on the relationship between their walking and their intellectual energy and their insight all at once. I mean, a lot of people are into exercise at the present moment, but they don't do it and talk about the Parsha. So Kaplan, the great innovator, was special in that regard. The other thing that I wanted to say was in terms of gematria, I think, and I don't remember where I got this, but the word Elohim and Teva are both 86. I think that is an old equivalence. Kaplan pointed that out to me, but I think it existed among learned rabbis going back quite far.
No,
Teva, meaning nature, and Elohim are both 86.
So, Mel, you don't know this, but Enid Lader, my friend and colleague, Rabbi Enid Lader, maybe knows this, that a teacher of ours, Daniel Pekarsky's mother, Mel Pekarski, was for a number of years Kaplan secretary and probably had to go around in the park capturing his notes, which requires many different kinds of intelligences. But I don't want to let us off the hook. I mean, we have a lot of collective intelligence here, right? Torah, Tet, Vav, Resh, Hey. Someone has to put that together for us.
611.
Okay, and tell us how you got to that. What are the components? Because that requires another mathematical operation that you need to do.
So you need to find the word Torah, which is a Tet, Vav, Resh, and Hey. And then Tet is equal to, Tav is equal to 400. Vav is equal to 6. Resh is equal to 200, and Hey is equal to 5. And when you add that all up, you get 611.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. I have one more thing for people to do.
Mathematical.
Mathematical, kinesthetic.
Did you write it down?
Yes.
Did you write it down? Okay.
I did.
Yep.
So a little fine motor going on there.
Right.
There you
Eye
go.
hand motion,
Okay.
brain. I mean, it's all like, it's a gestalt, really.
So I have one more thing for you to do with this chart that we've done at Mayim Rabim with our congregants when we explored Shavuot traditions in mathematics. I'd like you to come up with the gematria, many people don't know this, of their own Hebrew name. What is the secret, indwelling, numerical value of your Hebrew name as you put it together from the chart of numerical values? And if anyone can do that and share it with us quickly, I'll be grateful.
If you can't read it here, you should maybe go on your phones or something, or
Right.
on your computers. I don't know.
So first, you have to know your Hebrew name, which I'm sure almost everyone in this call does. And what would be the numerical anchor that goes with your Hebrew name? Yeah, it was 263, I think. Anyway, someone got a quick grasp on that?
311.
Okay, and so tell us your Hebrew name and how you put that together.
Whose is it?
Yeah.
Well, I did. It's Eric. I just decided to use Eric, but I guess if I was more adventurous, I could have gone with Eliezer Gershon, but then it would have been for another webinar.
That would have been harder. Okay, good, Eric. You're an expert on your own Hebrew name. When we do this in a communal setting, when we're exploring Shavuot and numbers and mathematical intelligences, I'll often, after people have done their own calculation, ask them to go around the room and find the person whose gematria close to their own. And I just have to tell you, this is a Bashert story. It turns out that a very lovely couple in our congregation, Sharon, if you're still in the call, Belle and Sandra discovered they're a partner, they're Zug, they're married, that the gematria for their Hebrew names are very different names. Why do we share this? Because there is a wonder to simply counting, to going from 1 to 50, of putting those numbers together that is appealing to someone with mathematical intelligence, or all of us, as we increase our mathematical intelligence. So that's one example, I think, of being number smart in relationship to Shavuot.
I have a question. It's going to be hard to get answers, but my question is, I'm wondering if people who wrote down they were mathematical in the choices of multiple intelligences, whether or not you really enjoyed this activity. Like, did it speak to you I wonder if it spoke to you in a deeper way than others. It's hard to know. In a room, we'd be able to find that answer, but not now.
Or, Hillel, just to put you on a spot for a moment, if you're a word people person, did it bore the heck out of you? Because that's not the intelligence you like to employ.
Yeah, it's still fun.
It's
No,
still-
I think it's a fun kind of an exercise. But as I was doing it and figuring out, gematria is very interesting. My immediate reaction is Mordecai Kaplan would just throw that out the window because it's reeks of mysticism and so on, just would offend his rationality. That's just my take.
Well, we could have a longer discussion. No, I'm interested. Maybe at the end, people who want to stay on can do that. I'm very interested in hearing that. But of course, I am a kind of reconstructionist, post-Kaplanian lover of Kaplan that feels that, he himself comes at this stuff from a particular angle, and we're always trying to broaden our connections through multiple intelligences. I'm guessing Kaplan would be more sensitive and attuned to moving into the arena of naturalistic, and then we'll do verbal linguistic. Deb, you want to talk about naturalistic?
Yeah, this is really my love. This is where my interests lie. And actually did some work. I studied Howard Gardner pretty intensively because I was looking for definitions of spirituality that didn't talk about God and religion. And I was hoping that he would have an intelligence for spirituality. And he struggled with this greatly. So he looked at naturalistic intelligences and he saw it as a combination. So I should go back a little bit. Naturalistic intelligences and spiritual intelligences were not part of his original set of intelligences. So he obviously needed to put naturalistic intelligence in, given that that's such an important topic in this day and age. So he went back and he saw, well, nature is a combination of intra, so you bring yourself into the world, into nature, and inter, you interact with it and with other people. And it's also about, I love this term I learned when I was in Israel visiting early childhood programs. I guess it's prayer, pokech evrim, open your eyes, opening up your eyes so you can see what's in front of you, you can see the nature that's happening. And finally, another part of naturalistic intelligence is about wonder, awe, joy, and amazement. You have the inter and the intra. You have your need to open your eyes. Somebody had a question. And you have this ability to wonder. So was that a question from Mel?
You keep going.
Mel, did you have a question? He's on mute. He was waiting.
This is Jane. There's a professor at Harvard, Richard Wallman, who worked with Gardner and has written, he's the father of one of our synagogue members. He's written a book called Thinking with Your Soul, which he and Gardner were positing would constitute another type of intelligence.
Oh, that would be so good. Okay.
Oh, Bob, listening to a Jewish thing.
Pardon me?
Go ahead. As Deb looks for more that she's going to share with you about naturalistic, I'm going to, because of this share screen, I can't get to chat. So I'm going to do a piece of quick communication with Dan. Dan, do you want me to try again to share the screen so that I know you have some other commitments you have to move on to. You want me
I'm all right at the moment.
Okay.
Probably easier.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I think somebody asked something about the religious part, but I'm going to ask you to do this experience with me. I want you to close your eyes and go into nature. Take yourself for a walk if you want, or picture yourself near a place in nature that you really love to be, whether it be the beach and sand, near seashells, or a mountain, pine cones, rocks. Find a little piece of nature that you can fit into your hand, something that is calling to you, and hold it, just hold it in your hand. Take a deep breath. Just be with it, make it your friend, and then let yourself feel. And I'd love for some of you to share how you're feeling while you're holding that piece of nature. So a few of you unmute, please, and share your thoughts. So how is this making you feel? The voice here,
Your piece of nature.
how did it feel to hold that in your hand? Anybody hold a seashell? Rock? A leaf? A pine cone? When I do this exercise with young children, when I do this with teachers, when I do it with people who are learning to be nature educators, I often get the same response, and I'm curious whether or not some of you felt this. Calm, centered, connected, integrated. Some people say they have memories. Did you feel any of these feelings? Say that loud.
So if it's taking a while to settle in, that's fine, and you can, share it later when we get to the end of the talk, or now. We'll take another moment before we segue into another intelligence.
Okay, I just want to say that
Debbie has noted, Debbie Chesson, that it filled her with memories of childhood vacations, and we also get from
peaceful,
from Joan, pebble on the shore, peaceful, and a third one.
Beauty, the park next to the
Lincoln.
Okay, great. A piece that when you go into these like memory or reflective moments, it helps you to know who you are. I mean, a lot of us are not young chicks anymore, but we're always changing. To know our own disposition, to open up our eyes to see other people's dispositions, helps us to meet those multiple intelligences. And Howard Gardner was fond of saying that each of us could strengthen all of those intelligences. We can be better receivers of the world, better connectors to others. And I just sort of like that.
Thank you, Deb. I'm going to bridge into verbal linguistic, word smart kind of stuff, but I do want to note that there's something Kaplanian bubbling beneath all of this, whether Kaplan would have loved gematria, probably not. Multiple intelligence, probably. He was influenced by Dewey, who certainly had a respect for that. But Kaplan sensitizes us to the way that holidays change and transform themselves. So as Deb was exploring nature, I was thinking about the remarkable changes in the holiday of Shavuot, period move into Peoplehood, and when kibbutzim and others did things like come up with a dahlia, dance festivals. I mean, think of that as a wonderful way of privileging a new kind of intelligence, kinesthetic, when traditional Jewish life is heavily invested in book linguistic smarts. Part of the Zionist program is to produce, sometimes they call it more normal, that's a funny word, more well-rounded human beings in their Jewishness, which means have access to these different dimensions. Then if we could begin linguistic, the word smart, I'm going to, as you move down to some different names for Shavuot that we have in the packet, I'm going to say that while Shavuot is underutilized for the reasons I suggested in the beginning, it is such a remarkable example of being a multi-named Jewish holidays. I love it in Kohen book when all the names we have for God, source, wisdom, healer, we come across God the multi-name that happens 3 or 4 times.
Can I share here about the cookies?
Sure.
So, I mean, doing this memories back for Jeff and I don't know if Barbara Wetzler is on. She's a friend of ours. We spent family holidays together, and she would make cookie letters of all the different names, and they would be coded so that all the cookies would be put out on the table, and the kids would sort the cookie color to spell out each of the names for Shavuot. That's just one of the things that she used to do for our children when we were young.
So being aware of those names refines our understanding of the richness and complexity of the holiday and how it evolves over time. So Shavuot is indeed Hag Zman Matan Toratenu, the great gift of the giving of Torah, but that's only one of its names. Dan, could you move us through them? Yeah, and I'll read it. We'll pause for a second and we'll move on. It's Hag HaShavuot. It's the holiday of the weeks, of the counting. By the way, I have found for myself, and I think for many others, in this time of timelessness that we're experiencing as we stay at home, one day feels very much like the other, and simply turning that Omer counter and knowing that we've moved to day 10 or day 11, that's reassuring that we're imposing time on a rather timeless existence, but we're not done yet. One of the names, and there's more. So let's pause. Someone else want to give a name?
We didn't do that last one.
Yeah, we did. Hag HaShavuot, the holiday of the weeks and the counting. It's Hag HaBikurim. It's the holiday where we bring the first fruits to, and where we recite what Lawrence Hoffman says is the first structured prayer and tradition. I was a wandering Aramean. I was in Egypt. And these fruits share a powerful dimension of the holiday. And I think I have one more here. Do I not, Dan?
The one that he lowered it.
It's the Harvest Festival, right? Of the things that you were holding from nature, you could have had a beautiful shaft of barley or wheat. That would have put us in the Shavuot frame.
I just want to say, every Jewish holiday, you all probably know this, except for Purim, is linked to nature.
Right. And we still haven't exhausted all the names, hence all the meanings, hence all the richness of exploration of Shavuot, because we're going to go to one more that we have
also,
here.
if we go back, a couple are missing.
Yeah, so we'll get to them. Okay. Okay, it's one of the Shalosh Regalim, right? The Yera'eh. It's a time we have to appear before our community, before God. So it's linked, we know, to Pesach and to Sukkot, and that wonderful switch of Kiddush, largely the same, but we call Pesach, right? Zman Chayritenu, time of our freedom. Matan Toratenu, and we call Sukkot Zman Simchatenu, which puts us in a wonderful spiral of names and experience. Deb, as happens to us a lot, listening, but yes, we're focusing on this intelligence, but there's others we're missing, and we'll give her the last word here in a little bit about what we're missing, and maybe you'll have some words too. But I want to move on to a poem now. Again, I don't know who first pointed me to this poem. It's called When They Received the Torah, a poem for Shavuot, in a book of Lee, a holidays by Leah Naor.
I will scroll down. I just want to clarify that I did not write this text. So. Sorry.
I'm sorry?
I just needed to clarify, I did not write the text from Devarim. My name's on it. Yes, never mind.
Oh, yes. And new revelation today, the author of Devarim, channeling Mordecai Kaplan and repeating the
Oh,
Torah.
that's so cool.
Okay, so this is a little hard to read, but I'd ask you to go into your word smarts and your receptive mode. And Deb and I are going to read stanza by stanza this poem that comes from Leah Naor. And of course, like all poetry, it demands and rewards us for attention to with some of it midrash and some is her own. You want to do the first paragraph? Then?
Sure. When they received the Torah, the desert was still and no birds chirped and the wind did not blow and the ox did not low and the people stood around and everyone saw.
That's exactly how when the Torah.
It was on the third day of the third month, just yesterday, the garment, and suddenly there was a heavy cloud. All of the mountain of Sinai trembled, and I heard that everyone really saw the voices. They really saw the voices.
That's exactly how it was when they received the Torah.
From the mountain smoke arose. It was like from a kiln. There was thunder and lightning and awe and the sound of a horn, and the people stood aside because stepped back and only Moses climbed the mountain.
That's exactly how it was when we received the Torah.
And suddenly there was silence. Even the wind did not hum. The silence was so full and no bird chirped, and even the angels did not break into song. And all the people received the Torah.
That's exactly how it was when they received the Torah. So before someone accuses me of the absolutely literal terms, subverting one of Kaplan's messages after having turned him into a gematrius, I have a question for people, which is, do you think that that Leah Naor means it when she interrogates us as she shares the midrash? That's exactly how it was when they received the Torah. I'm curious, you smart folks, you have how is it used, this phrase, throughout the poem? Any thoughts? Just unmute yourself, say who you are, and offer your literary theory about how the Torah is being presented. Okay. Thank you for being our Rabbanim for this gathering. Shavuot life is especially meaningful these past 7 years. Shalom's yahrzeit on the that was Carol's husband. Yeah, Carol, I remember. Okay, these side comments are really at the heart of things sometimes. But anyone have it's too bad we don't have Carol Kessler from North Shore on this call, because her field is literature and she knows much about the use of irony, words and phrases in poetic context. But again, you don't have to be a professor of literature to have an idea about this poem.
I just mention, I just want to say that it's the first time I had seen this poem, but it reminds me of, a classic 20th century Shavuot creation was Judith and Ira Eisenstein's What is Torah? And it's based on the Akdamut melody. And it really is almost as, in the wilderness, no wind blew, in the desert, no, it sounds almost like a takeoff on that.
Yeah, I am sure that they are aware of that same source. No, I'm not surprised that you have a comment here. Please unmute and offer.
Well, the poem kind of indicates the matter of awe and wonder as a source of religious knowledge. And of course, that's very much associated with Heschel. Kaplan, of course, was sensitive to that notion. And but what he felt, because Heschel talks about a meaning beyond the mystery. And Kaplan, I think, would stop at the mystery itself and not perhaps talk about a meaning beyond the mystery. If I could take a minute, I wanted to go back to the matter of mysticism that was mentioned.
If you don't
Yeah.
mind holding that, I
Yeah.
would like to go back to it too. But I don't want to miss an opportunity if Marcia is still with us.
Okay. Thank
Marcia
you.
Falk was here. We'll come back to it for sure. But Marcia, you are quite a wonderful poet and a turner of words and phrases. You understand poetic souls. If you're listening to us, would you like to share a thought about what's going on here in the poem? Caught you by surprise.
I didn't realize I was going to be put on the spot like that. Would I like to share a thought? Ask me a specific question you have about the poem, and I'll see if I can answer it. Or how.
I think the Lior Naor, when she creates this refrain, that's exactly how it was when they received the Torah. Do you think her poetic intent was literal? Do you think she's trying to convince us of that, or is something else at work? That's what I would like to invite you to comment on.
Well, I don't know. I think you can read this as ironic, because obviously no one knows how it was at all, much less exactly how it was. It's a strange voice in this poem. I mean, there's also the repetitions when they received the Torah, I almost think, I wish I could, was this originally written in Hebrew? I wish I could hear it in its original music, because I think that would tell us something about what she's doing here with the repetition of that's exactly. So, and
Me too. Thank you. I'm going to try to hunt that down. If you
Okay.
let me know.
Okay.
I love the phrase that you just used about hearing it in its original music, because it brings me back to multiple intelligences.
And musical intelligence, we have yet to explore. That's really rich. Because we want to move on to other intelligences, we want to make sure at the end we can circle back to mysticism. So Mel, please move. But I want to suggest that I'm very fond of this poem. I know it's odd in many ways. For me, it reminds me of the European philosopher Paul Ricoeur, who talks about in life we move from primary naivete to realism to what he calls second naivete. So for me, this is true. There was one point in life where I was sure that what happened at Sinai was very far from the theophany described and in Midrash. And I think perhaps that's where a whole school of Jewish rationalists may have appeared to me. But having grown older and being influenced by Heschel, as Mel would have it, I think there's a sense of wonder about, well, maybe it did happen something like that. I don't want to lose that possibility. And that Ricoeur would call the birth of second naivete, which means you can still go back and reconstruct Sinai in a dozen different rational ways, but maybe there was something emotionally, poetically, mystically that happened exactly as it's being portrayed here. At least that's what I think about, encourage you to think about. We're going to shift to another intelligence. So I actually think, Mel, this is probably a good time to capture before it's lost what you might want to say about Kaplan as mystic or non-mystic.
No, what I wanted to say, I wanted to point to a factoid. I believe in factoids. In the early 1940s, Gershon Scholom's book, Major Trends in Jewish Mysticism, was published. And for some reason, Shucken, who published it, happened to be in New York. And Kaplan asked Shucken if he could borrow his copy. And he read it with great interest. And one of the things that interested him most was the concept of the Ein Sof. The concept of the Ein Sof. The Ein Sof, as you remember, is the highest level of divinity, and the Ein Sof is not a person. And Kaplan was fascinated by the idea that his notion of the power that makes for salvation being a non-person and the Ein Sof had much in common. And so Kaplan was open to what he could learn from Jewish mysticism. And of course, his book, The Greater Judaism in the Making, which is a wonderful history of Jewish thought, contains a great chapter on Jewish mysticism, which is not critical. It's just a very fine description and insight into Jewish mysticism.
Thank you, Mel. Our friend and colleague, Lawrence Pinsker, Rabbi Larry Pinsker, has joined the call. That's really wonderful. Larry, every technology has its limit. I'm looking in the chat and it sounds very interesting, but the words at the end of each sentence have broken off. So I'm going to invite you to take a moment, if you would, and share your thought with us.
Jeff, it's wonderful to see you and Debbie. It's been entirely too long, except for this these recent encounters via Dan's wonderful lectures on Sunday afternoons. And I hope you are both safe and well.
We are.
Earlier I had cited Stephen T. Katz's famous declaration that Mordecai Kaplan was inescapably and definitely a mystic, because our categories of mysticism were, I guess now I would say in reflecting on what Debbie was saying, I think we don't realize that you can be a mystic through all those forms of intelligence that Debbie has been revealing to us. The Kaplan's mysticism had to do with the collective imagination of all the people who have rallied around the struggle to make intelligent and humanly advantageous adaptations in life using Torah and using the experience of the Jewish people. And then I just wanted, in the poem that you cited, which I had never encountered before, and which is fantastic. And I was actually trying to rewrite it into Hebrew, trying to imagine how the poet would have written it, but I'm not fast enough doing that.
Yeah.
But it's such an explicit echo of the biblical imperative to remember that you experienced the Exodus, and you experienced, you who are here in this moment, 20 generations or 50 generations, whatever the number, since Sinai, since Exodus, that, and whenever the refrain, that's exactly how it was when they received the Torah.
Right.
It's such a, it's you know, it's that wonderful expression, you shall break their teeth, which punctuates all educational encounters with stubbornness. You know, it doesn't mean literally punch them in the mouth and make sure they need to go to the dentist. It means that means that you know, wake up, become mindful of what you're doing when you do this.
Yeah.
And very specifically, this text, it took me into that walk that Debbie was asking us to take into nature and to grasp some piece of it. And all I could think of was my experience as a Jew includes having been at Sinai.
Yeah.
That's the
So-
nature, that's my nature as a Jew. I was there, of course I was there. And
Right.
however, I transformed that from being an abstraction to being a chilling and thrilling personal experience. That's when I get what this project is that I think, yeah, Stephen Katz is right. Kaplan made us all mystics. We just are so remote from the experience.
Well, and validated whatever the Torah of our generation is, whatever leads us to being better people, better Jews, that must have been revealed at Sinai as well, at least mythically and metaphorically speaking. Thanks, Larry. It's nice to hear your voice as well as your interpretations. I am going to move on because I want to be respectful of time, and we still have several other intelligences to capture. So I'm going to I'm going to show you a clip. It's a video that Mazon asked me to do about my own take of what the Omer means and what counting the Omer might mean in relationship to world justice and, of course, food justice. And I look at this, Eric, I wish I could see you right now because I know this was part of my discovery when we wrote the article comparing and contrasting Kaplan with Michael Rosenack, that while peoplehood is what drew me into Reconstruction, and Judaism as an evolving religious civilization, and all the beautiful tapestry that goes with the waving of the Omer, with all of that, there's something ethical at its core, and that's what I propose when we take a look at a 3-minute clip that Mazon, along with other rabbis, has circulated around the country for thinking about. And for me, this shifts to inter and intrapersonal intelligence and the way we understand ourselves in relationship to the world and other people and the ethical demands that places on us. So one person's take, and Dan, if you could take us there, I would be appreciative.
I'm sorry, you did video? I gotta go to yeah, I can do it.
Yeah.
Okay, let me find it.
While he's looking, I just want to sort of reiterate the inter and intra here. So we receive qualities from our observances of each holiday, and they do something to our intra, which then make us act in interpersonal ways. So it's sort of a cyclic thing going on.
Yeah. And I've been amazed to watch one local synagogue count the Omer with each day a different reflection of a Jewish artist about art. That felt very Kaplanian to me because art plays such a role, but somehow doesn't, for me, get to the heart of the Omer tradition, at least as I understand.
Well, you're probably not artistically.
Probably because of my limited artistic. No, I appreciate art deeply, and right. Okay.
You ready?
All right. Here you go.
Good morning, Boker Tov. This is Rabbi Jeffrey Shine from Minneapolis, and I'm wishing you a Hag Sameach, a very joyful, meaningful Pesach, Cedarbaum. And on behalf of Mazon, and in keeping with the concerns of Mazon, I'd like to do a little Torah teaching with you that situates us the day after Pesach, or the second day of Pesach, where we begin counting the Omer. Most of us, including myself, until maybe 15 years ago, when I think of the Omer, I am automatically turned to chapter 23 of the book of Leviticus, and we have this very festive counting of the Omer, marking 50 days between Pesach and Shavuot, the waving of the sheaves of grain, a great deal of pageantry. And it took a student of mine to point out to me that the first use of the term Omer is not in Leviticus, but in the book of Exodus, chapter 16. And here's the way it unfolds. The Israelites are in the wilderness. Food is a constant struggle, but keeping Shabbat is a mitzvah. So the Israelites are told that they will be given the double portion of the manna of their food on Friday, so they won't have to worry about Shabbat. And chapter 16 tells us that originally what the Israelites did was to gather according to their wants, and the regrettable situation that came out of that random gathering was an inequitable spread of resources, or to put it exactly in the words of the Torah, Vayasu Chaim Yisrael v'yokutu harbeh v'hamit, that some Israelites ended up with much and some little. So here we have a foreshadowing of what the environmentalist Garrett Hardin will call the tragedy of the commons. We don't know how to share resources that need to be allocated fairly, but there's a solution, and here's the way it comes. V'yimudu b'Omer. The Israelites then learned to measure what was there. V'lo hedif hamarbeh v'hamit v'lo hechsir ish lapi achlu laktu. So when they measured, when they were careful to measure, then everyone had the resources that they needed. Well, it's probably almost insulting to my listeners.
Uh-oh. Your voice went up. No voice.
It's the link.
So fill in.
Yeah, so what that guy is saying is that that's a model for food justice. It reflects the shift of Mazon over the years from primary distribution of resources to advocacy that creates food justice, and it's rooted most deeply, I think, in this notion that our sense of others in the world and our sense of selves has to be put in a context where we learn how to share and sacrifice. And of course, I did this before the coronavirus and COVID-19, which is sort of an aleph comma v'kama around this. Maybe I should have used my own link. Anyway, you get the point that the tradition of counting the Omer is itself so rich in complexity and can move us into mystical ranges. It can also move us into thinking about tikkun olam and issues of justice and food justice. So I want to recognize one more kind of intelligence, and this will give you access to, and hopefully she'll sing her way through this.
No, what about kinesthetic?
Oh, Deb is reminding me.
We haven't talked about body smarts yet, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking when you do tikkun olam, when you have to get active, you move your body, but there's also something in our house that we laugh about.
Are doing qigong together?
No, well, we do that
Okay.
too, but
So it takes a
motor.
great deal of kinesthetic dexterity to, when we get to Shavuot, we're up to the 50th day, and one of our kids originally, had to roll the Omer counter back. First of all, that requires spatial sense, right? Which way am I going in order to get forward or
For
backwards?
some of us,
Yeah.
it takes.
Yeah, and so that very physical, kinesthetic part of the holiday gets embodied in the rolling of the Omer. Thank you, Deb. And a lot of these intelligences come together, I think, in a pretty remarkable way when we listen to Chava Alberstein's version of Chad Gadya. You'll see the beautiful art, the visual, the spatial, and the musical, but you'll also see when she turns the narrative upside down, as you'll see at the very end of Chad Gadya, a different kind of intelligence at work. Yeah, we'll hope that this
We
works.
hope it works because it's very powerful.
Yeah.
We think.
And it's also about the marking of time. I'll say a word about that, but only after you've had a chance to watch it. it's not feeding the music, is it, Ben?
No,
Maybe you have to go off mute.
now it is.
Here, I'll go back. Sorry.
Hey, Dan, if we could end this screen share, I'll have a few comments and then open it up to some closing comments or questions.
No guest.
So can everyone be muted at this point? Because I think I'm hearing.
Yeah, hold on. I'm going to mute everyone, and then I'm going to unmute you. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're on.
I guess I want to say just a word about the measurement of time and what it means to trace things from Pesach to Shavuot, and what comes across for me powerfully in that song is that, Chava Alberstein, like any person who's steeped in the modern Jewish-Israeli dialogue, understands that being a lamb in a world of wolves is not acceptable, and so Jewish power, Jewish sovereignty is quite important to her. But then she challenges her own narrative, at least that's the way I understand it. So what if now we come up top of what Amichai calls the Chad Gad Yam machine, the long history of empires coming after one another. So is there a time where that's at play anymore? And for me, that harkens to, we start Pesach with Pesach Mitzrayim, what happened in Egypt. We move on to Pesach Dorot, the story of Pesach repeating itself in all generations. But we end, and this does harken to a dimension of Shavuot, with thinking about Pesach Latid, sometime when Passover achieves its universal significance for the Jewish people and for all peoples. And one educational scholar calls that the development of an ecological imagination, where we can move ourselves in time and see those shifts. What Deb and I have tried to do over the years is to make some of the thinking, not exact replicas, because as Rabbi Brief, not Neil Brief, one of my teachers, pointed out, and I think Hillel had mentioned this to me, Simeon Maslin created a takeoff of the Shabbat Seder. I was just speaking the other day to Ron Wolfson, who's done a fuller framing of that. I don't think anyone equaled some of what the Society Hill staff was able to create when it created 12 Shabbat Seders throughout the year with Kaplan's intent in mind. If Pesach and the Pesach Seder can help us tell this part of the Jewish life, how can we create Seders around Jewish art, being in America, what happiness means? And there's a lot of artistry in that. But it's really in that spirit of how can we take the rituals, the symbols, the questioning that's so real for us at Pesach.
And the Haggadah
Deb.
also has like the 4 children, which we've expanded into Howard Gardner's intelligences. So every Haggadah can actually speak to every single person at the table.
Now that's an interesting idea.
Every child at the table, so that child's inner disposition is touched in a way that brings them, connects them back to Judaism. Right at the table.
Anywho, there were a few comments that came near the end. Someone mentioned Kishnev Bergen-Belsen acknowledges disparity and advocates for opportunities to correct them. Yes, that's what I think it means to get out of the Chad Gad Yam machine and create a different, better world. I'm wondering if anyone has some closing comments about what this sparks for them, innovations that it may suggest, because there are a lot of creative thinkers on this seminar, or things that it may have reminded you of that you've lost track of. So we're going to move into a quiet mode and invite people to, for a few minutes, share some observations,
and
comments, ask questions. And we understand that people need to leave at this point. You'll just sign off. And those who still have questions, they're exploring.
But we're glad you joined us.
Thank you.
Shines, maybe I'll start just very briefly, a couple of thoughts before I forget. First of all, Yishar Chacham, that was wonderful. Am I muted? No.
No,
okay.
You're not.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with languages, I think you know. So although the Chad Gadya with Chav Alberstein refers in the YouTube video to English lyrics, I would have said Hebrew lyrics, because part, of course, of what she's doing there is translating Aramaic into Hebrew, which is this interesting. We think of it more often with Yiddish, but the Israelis struggle with other Jewish languages, which I find fascinating. I'm told by an Israeli Reform rabbi that at one point the Israeli Reform movement tried translating the Kaddish, all the Kaddishes, into Hebrew, and it was a complete failure, which is interesting. But I can't resist just one point about, I'm not usually a gematria person. I thought when you were asking about Torah, you were going to point to sort of a famous discussion. And I think this is not necessarily about mysticism. It's about form. It can be just about formal playing with words and numerical values for words, which is part of what we do, which is that Torah, as was noted, is 611. Well, wouldn't you think it was 613?
Yeah.
And the answer is famously, well, it says Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, Moses taught us 611. God gave the first 2 of the 10 directly. So, which is it's a nice, it's not a mystical thing. I think it's just a drash, right?
Yeah,
very
right.
nice.
Very good. Other observations, things you were thinking about as this flowed on? Quiet group.
Jeffrey and Deb, thank you so much, and thanks for inviting me in and including me in this really nice program. I think that I'm still thinking about spiritual intelligence and how, especially when we overlay that, the idea of that on with the poem, the Leah or poem at Sinai, at Passover, we're told to tell the story as if we were there. And what about at Sinai, right? We understand the idea of Sinai as being all of us were there, but just at different times. And I think there's a real rich spiritual experience to consider thinking about. So how did it happen? And the poem collection of Omer's is Chag Li, right? My holiday. So how was it my experience? And how did it really happen for me? I think I look forward to thinking about that and maybe moving that forward with my own congregation.
Yeah, I mean, Ina and I have done a lot of this over decades, but I can really see that being a project of a community of kids or a community where new verses are put in, new understandings of what it would have been like to be at Sinai, but yet after each of them, the whole community says, isn't that exactly how it happened?
Would be very serious to do intergenerational.
Yeah, and intergenerationally for sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
I see Mel down waving his hand.
Well, I want to thank the Shines for generating a lot of thoughts and for helping me to think through the meaning of Shavuot in a different kind of way. Kaplan about Sinai was ambivalent, as he was about so many things. He said on the one hand that the revelation at Sinai, to believe that was worse than sin than bigamy. And what he had in mind in his negativity was the idea that God should reveal himself to one group was the height of idiocy, because God reveals himself to all groups and does that through the mind, which in terms of your intelligences would be the logic and the self. Kaplan was a rationalist. He believed in the efficacy of reason, and especially the understanding of reason that comes from Josiah Royce, who wrote about the matter of insight. Insight, we would say colloquially, it's a connecting of the dots. It's seeing the whole picture. But what's of great interest to me is Josiah Royce talked about who Kaplan discovered rather early in his career and who he valued very, very much, that the insight is something that we want to be intimate with, which is a sort of strange way of talking in a certain sense, but the knowledge should be something deep within us. And so that's the meaning of revelation to Kaplan, on the other hand. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mel. That was really
Thank you.
terrific.
Yeah.
Joan, you had a comment, I think.
No, I'm.
Oh, or Jeannie? Someone, I thought I saw a hand. Okay.
Oh, there's
And,
one right there.
okay, our friend Jane.
I don't think,
Got
is
it.
Jane
Okay.
there?
Yeah, something occurred to me with the spiritual intelligence that unlike many of the others, which are how we understand the world, how we approach the world cognitively or physically or in a nature sense, the spiritual sense is if understanding it in a Kaplanian way, is how we present ourselves to the world, how we interface with what our actions are, given our understanding of our responsibilities and the nature of the world. So it's a different focus from some of the other intelligences.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of what Deb said in connection with that, that in a way spirituality has something to do with how we go from the intra, which is very personal, and present that and take that into the world.
But-
of the
Exactly. Exactly.
That there's an area of spirituality that is purely intra. You know, how you feel, like what brings wonder to you? What brings awe and joy to you internally? And that then affects how you act outwardly. I think it's both.
Well, yeah.
So there's a couple comments here. Thank you. Appreciate the message and thoughtful format.
Yeah, everybody who wants, those are to everybody.
Yeah. Always be self-reflective, mindfulness, appreciation of the inscrutable universe. Okay.
Oh, love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Dan, if it's okay, I just want to, since so many folks here are connected in one fashion or another to Jewish education, I wanted people share with people an alert that there'll be 2 more webinars later in the year. In the summer, there'll be a grand unveiling of a project that's been going on for several years, the 21st century Kaplanian vision of Jewish education, which is in the very final stages of being tweaked. And
Right, but people can look at our website now, right? You want to point them there.
Yeah, you can get a sneak preview, although there's a couple things that will help you view that in a little more comprehensive way. But we put it up so you can look, but we'll let you know when there's a video that takes you into it, as well as a little refinement in how to use it. And sometime in the fall, I am very excited to share what now is feeling to me like an ebook of some sort. It's a remix of resources for lifelong development of spirituality and God connection. Many of these came from people who moved within the Kaplanian orbit and Jewish education, and some of them are new. And the goal is to make sure that these kinds of questions and conversations and dialogues can begin at birth and can go throughout our lifetime. And there are resources to sustain that. And I hope this will be a contribution to that. So stay tuned.
Great. And while we're at it, you probably can sell a few more copies, or you would like to have texted me, right? So that's still out
Sure, why not?
there. Which is, yeah, we'll provide links to anybody who wants. Just say a word about that book before we go.
So text me Ancient Jewish Wisdom
get one to
meets
show.
Contemporary Technology. You don't have to. We can
All right.
offer it to you for 30%. It's an exploration of all the dissonances, the creative synergy that happens when we think of text me as ancient Jewish wisdom and as social media and message. It's really sort of the heart of what led to that particular bracha that I shared with you. And understanding, I was realizing the other day when I was appreciating a connection back to our home congregation in Cleveland, Kol Halev, that we have a Kol Halev diaspora now that's connected through courtesy of Zoom and others. And that can't be so very different than the experiences that Jews may have had in Yemen when they discovered they could stay in touch with Maimonides through the new technology of delivering a shaila, a question in written form. So it's a sort of meditation around that. My friend and colleague Hillel has been a careful reader of that, and so and Enid has been with me when I presented. Anyway, I've been told it makes you think. So if that's the criteria for what you're looking for, you can get it for 30% off through the Kaplan Center.
Great. I hope to see folks same time next week, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Feel
Thank you
better
for
then.
doing this, Dan. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.